another train's running along here. Probably 202 should come earlier today.
Full ice maker, full set of cold drinks all in here. Stuart can get you seated, get you something cold to drink while you were filling your order, making up your mind what you're going to eat. This was all ice down here at the bottom. When you got up, when you left, they would strip the tablecloth itself, go in here, and when they got to terminal, the little side door went open and everything right out as fast as they could.
Yeah.
On the Miami end, we knew that they had 7 miles to turn to go back to where the Y was. The Y is a great big piece of track, triangle shape that you make a K-turn for a train. The crews would all swarm on board as soon as the people were done when they got to Miami, Buena Vista Yard, and they had 7 miles up. They backed the train around and they backed it 7 miles. So that's about 15 miles altogether. That's all the time they had to polish everything, clean everything, reload, restock while they were moving. And then they would get the train ready turned to go back to New York. Must wash hands, right or wrong? Wash hands. Oh, okay. Well, how do we do that? Where are we going to go to wash our hands? We're not going to use the slop sink for the dishes, are we?
The slop sink?
No, we're not. We're going to use Pullman sink. Now this is very, very old and very antique, so I'm going to be very, very gentle, and I'm going to open the sink. And
you guys look
inside
at
the
that.
sink bowl is hot water and cold water and a soap dish. And when I'm all done, I can close it up, and this drain vent will now drain down this pipe and out. Wow. Notice how round, there's nothing to bump or catch you. These were in all of the compartments, the sleeping compartments, and because everything was so tight, the bed folded up and the basin folded down, we didn't want you to get bumped, no sharp edges to get caught on. This is the Pullman sink. Scott towels. Scott, right across the little towel. And wash hands before starting work and after each visit, right? Just like any real restaurant.
That is awesome.
It's not really original, but it's for our workers, again, the guys who are staying over for weekends want to be able, and especially if they get contaminated. We have all kinds of chemicals that we use. We have a place now that we can rinse them off right away. So it's a safety feature more than anything. Like it, doesn't it? But that it belongs on this car. It's a communications cord. You are exactly right. The conductor can signal the train crew in the engine, and the engine happens to be this way in this case, by pulling on this cord. I'm not going to yank on it because it's not connected to anything right now, but there was an entire set of signals that the conductor could use to the engineer. The engineer, of course, would use his overhead whistle, and everybody would hear the whistle going back. But everybody in the train could communicate. There's one on every car somewhere. On this car behind it, it's not a cord, but it's a silver lever that's hidden around the corner.
You were right.
Yes, you are right.
What is it, 1916? 1912 passenger car, number 3607.
This gives you an idea what a friction bearing looks like. What they used to call friction bearings, or the plain bearing. You've got the bronze bearing here with the steel axle. Down below you can see the wadding and the oil lube. That would normally have to be kept somewhere up right around in this level.
At this point you would probably have a hot box right there.
Very likely. And that's why this train was limited to 25 miles an hour coming up from Miami, because they wanted to make sure these bearings would get here in one piece.
Right.
So they had to keep stopping, checking the temperature, doing a lube fill, and then they could proceed some more distance. So basically, almost, I guess every, 20 miles or so, they would find a passing track and pull over and check it. So they would have to do that.
Yeah, these springs are more compact because, it's mainly concrete in here.
Yeah. You have to remember, this car is the equivalent weight of one of the FEC's red rock hoppers. It's a 100-ton car. But the 6-wheel trucks and the heavy steel construction and the thick concrete floor make it a very smooth riding car, great for passengers. And most of the car companies borrowed Pullman's design for that. He was the first one that pioneered that, and everybody said, that's such a great idea. Let's borrow it.
And that's probably where he invented
But
that sink.
the Pullman company specialized with the sleeping cars. ACF and some of the other car companies, CCF up in Canada, they did the baggage cars and the passenger coaches. Not so much with Pullman.
Right.
So, and over here, this is about 30 years, 40 years difference. This is 1950s. We have modern roller bearings. So these are all sealed. Probably once a year they'll open those up and re-oil them, re-grease them, and seal them back up for the next year. You also notice too that the truck is a different design. Notably, it's two axles.
Trespasser. Look at that. Well, we count them as 3 trespassers. Wow. And that's what gives rail fans a bad name.
Absolutely.
Damn. You see people like them? Rail fans, if you see people like them, hit them. Just kidding.
No, don't
Just
hit
kidding.
them.
Just kidding.
But these are sealed bearings. They'll service them probably once a year, twice a year. They're much easier to maintain. You also notice we have the
That's probably where they hang off of it.
Absolutely.
Or
when they're
connecting the cars.
Coupling cars in the rail yard, that would be exactly where they'd hang on to. This car, notice it has 4-wheel trucks instead of 6 wheels, because this car is lightweight. It's actually 120,000 pounds, give or take. But
now, what's this big switch coming from over here?
This right
all the way
here
back
is
here.
actually the brake braking for the train car, where the heavyweight has a single cylinder brake cylinder underneath. This has a brake cylinder on each truck. So this is akin to what you'd see on today's diesel locomotives, where you have the brake cylinder on the exterior of the locomotive truck,
right,
with all the linkages going to the inside. Where the tool car, all the linkages are underneath the car and they're hard to get to. This is a lot easier to maintain.
Right.
This is the old battery box. You know, because of the vent holes to let the hydrogen gas out. And of course, this is the actual air reservoir for the car. Notice it's marked with its last COT&S inspection with the date and what shop did it. That's important because you got to know when it was last inspected and who did it, so you can go back if there's an issue.
Big tank right under it.
Tommy, before you walk off, I'm going to explain that this Marcona site, the building that's above, the towers above the train itself, to store our cars, was a delivery track for plastic pellets. The plastic pellets came by thousands and thousands of pounds. They look like this. Plastic pellets are actually fluid once they start moving with compressed air and flow out of the car into the building. They could put the pellets where they needed them, melt them, and then run them through their extrusion plant.
Molding.
Exactly so. We still have thousands of pellets.
Thousands of pellets to litter the ground.
All litter the ground here on this track.
There are
Thank you, Thomas.
places around the corner that you actually can't see rail ties. They're that deep in the piles.
Right.
This is variation on the 3-way brake valve that's on most freight cars. Again, you can see we have the inspection, shop, and date. So
November 1999.
When it was done.
Now, what's this big tank right underneath the car?
Unless I'm mistaken, that is the water tank.
Should be 2 under here. One is clean water and one is a holding tank. I'm not sure which
possibly
is which
2
underneath the car, but we do have blueprints for the car, and we will actually locate it for you. One is clean water pumped up to the car since they can only carry so much in the kitchen, and one is holding a retention tank.
Now this is the one-side service door for the car. This is why this door is sub-height, because as you can see, there's nowhere to go when you come out of here except straight to the track. So if the passenger actually could go through this door, they would end up face first on the track. So you only have these two handholds and this small stirrup step, so it's very tight to get up there. You really have to work at it.
It's for service.
Strictly for service. Most
Notice
likely.
the old Amtrak and the blue and red bands above them, still in service until 1989. Their color scheme at that time. Go ahead, Tom. 8089. Thomas, go ahead.
That's the old Amtrak car number, 8089, but in FEC days that had the name Fort Ribot on there.
Seth claims he has that name tag. We're going to be talking to Seth a week from Saturday.
Propane?
That, I believe, is
Generator.
actually a generator, yeah.
Generator.
If you look from over here, you can actually see the windings. That would have been most likely a DC generator.
There's an awful lot of power used on this car. His auxiliary power.
Here's where you would see a switch. Look at that, people. And there's the main line right there. The last railroad that you would see.
And this is FEC Caboose 806.
Tom, a boxcar originally?
Originally a boxcar back probably in the 1940s.
Cut out ends.
Modified at the end.
High-speed trucks that don't clear the step boxes. Notice the difference. The steps are added because it was a boxcar. Notice that things don't quite fit exactly. This way, please.
And modified the ends with a door. And welded a steel plate in here, put a door in, so you can go inside. Added the handrails with the brake wheel. Up here, we actually have a conductor brake control. There's one of these on each end, so the conductor can simply release the air pressure and apply the train brakes.
Why don't you tell us about releasing air pressure? That puts brakes on or takes brakes off?
The way the Westinghouse air brakes work, the train line charges the air reservoir for each car. And as I understand it, as long as the air reservoir is full, if you then release the pressure in the train line here by parting the train at the couplers, you can actually apply the brakes, or if you use a brake vent like this, you can apply the brakes by releasing that pressure. It triggers the three-way valve to understand that there's a brake application coming on, and it'll apply a proportional brake pressure.
So
However,
exhausting air from the train line tells the brakes to come on.
yes,
Opposite from, say, a truck. You're trying to put more air into the train line to get brakes on, and here you're trying to take air out of the train.
now if the air reservoir is empty, then the brakes are released, because there's no pressure for that brake valve to tap into to apply the brakes. So the old Hollywood movie where the train runs away because the air brake line came apart is kind of inaccurate, because they do actually stop if the brake line parts. It puts the train into emergency brake mode and locks up all the brakes.
Today's train brakes are very, very safe, providing one thing, and that is that you start from your initial terminal with a full train load of air. You do that, and the train line parts, as Tom says, the brakes come on and the train stops. Great idea. Thank you, Mr. Westinghouse.
Woo!
The FRED is actually the flashing rear end device. Its primary purpose is not only to mark the end of the train with a flashing red light so following trains know where you are, but they also monitor the brake pressure. It has a small radio in it that will broadcast to the locomotive what its brake pressure is at the tail end of the train. Basically, it takes the place of this entire caboose, because instead of having a conductor here in the bay window or up in the cupola on a cupola type caboose monitoring a brake gauge, he's actually up in the locomotive with the train locomotive engineer monitoring from the head end, and the FRED is taking care of the monitoring at the tail end.